Hi, Raymond Hunter here. I want to talk to you today about microgaps in math knowledge and the devastating impact that they can have on your test scores. And the reason I'm doing this now is because I know you got final exams coming up in a couple of weeks and you're probably really stressed. Understanding microgaps will help you to look at problems differently as you're reviewing and to get the test outcome that you want, the high test score that you really want. So what is a microgap in math knowledge? Math teachers call them gaps in knowledge, but I like to call them microgaps because the bottom line is students oftentimes, they understand 90% of what it takes to solve a problem, but there's these little gaps, little microgaps they have in their knowledge. So maybe they understand 90% of what it takes to do the problem, but they're only getting 80% of the credit or 70% of the credit or even less. Clearing up your microgaps will get you that 100% that you want and alleviate you of stress, and you can regain control of your test scores. And that's my goal for you. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to work through a really simple math problem to help you understand. Am I not recording? Okay, to understand what these microgaps are, to really gain a feel for what microgaps are. So here we are. The first step, I have to solve this equation for x, and x is being squared. So the first step is to undo the square. And the operation that does that is the square root. It's the inverse operation. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first. Here we are. Before I go on, some of you might be saying, hey, he made a mistake on this problem. And yeah, I did. But this is what I see students writing, so I'm going to just move forward from here with the next step. The next step is the square root and the square cancel, and it leaves me with x. And over here, I'm going to write what I see students writing, plus or minus 2. And the thing is, those are the right answers. The problem, though, is I've made two errors. The first error was going from the first step to the second step, and the second error is from the second to the third step. So maybe I'll only get 50% of the credit on this problem, and I got the right answers. It's very frustrating for students. So let me help you. Let me give you a little background on this so that we can talk about this and get you through it. So the first thing is we can test these answers and make sure they're right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 2 into the equation, and I'm going to simplify, and I get 4. Sure enough, it's the right answer. Check mark. Now I'm going to try the negative 2. I'm going to square that. I also get a 4. Check mark. It works. So the first step is, yes, both answers are correct. They both work. The next thing, and this is really important, is I need to make sure that you understand this. The square root of 4 is 2. It's not plus or minus 2. It's not minus 2. It is only positive 2. If I want the negative answer, I'll do this. And root 4 is 2. That says make it negative. The answer is negative 2. So I really want to emphasize, I cannot overemphasize, that root 4 is simply 2. It's not plus or minus 2. It's actually called the principal root, which means the positive root. Just give me the 2. All right, so let's see how that factors into what went wrong here. The first thing is, in my first step, I said that there's only one answer. I just put positive root 4. It should be plus or minus, but I just put positive, so I should have a plus or minus here. So that's my first problem. The second thing is I'm saying the root 4 is plus or minus 2, and it's not. It's just 2. And we show that right here. The root 4 is only 2. It is not plus or minus 2. So the problem is, my first mistake is I'm saying there's only one answer, and there's 2. The second mistake is from here to here, and I'm saying root 4 is plus or minus 2, and it's not. It's just 2. So again, you probably lose 50% of the credit, but think about all the stuff you knew. You know that you have to do the inverse operations to both sides of the equation. You know the inverse of the square is the square root. And you actually knew there's 2 answers. In the end, maybe you didn't fully understand why, you just kind of get into a rhythm, but you got both answers right. So the idea here, these are not careless errors. These are not laziness. These show that you have some gaps in your knowledge, your gaps in your understanding that I like to call micro gaps. And the important thing, and I got to really emphasize this, is that in math, the further along you go, the work becomes more of the answer. It becomes a bigger part of the answer. And when you get to really high level math, the work is the entire answer. So that's why it's super important that your work shows that you thoroughly understand what you're doing when you solve a problem. So in this video, we've talked about microgaps. I've helped you to understand what they are. And as you're doing your homework problems then, the important thing is for you to kind of be honest with yourself when you're working through steps. Do you really understand each and every step? I see a lot of times students have gray areas in certain problems, in certain steps, in certain problems. And what they'll do is they'll fiddle with it, look at the answer in the back of the book or whatever, and they'll see that it's right. And they'll go, okay, I guess I know what I'm doing, but do you? So, and where those weaknesses show up is on test scores. So anyways, so I'm going to be producing a bunch of other videos that show you things kind of like this. I have one on careless errors and whatnot to show you how to study for your exams differently so that you can get a much higher test score. So you can get a high test score.